Hi everybody, it's lovely to be joined by some fantastic professionals with me here today. We're going to be running a session on eating, feeding and sleep today, which is some of the topics that we hear come up quite often at Family Voice, and so we know lots of families have various struggles and difficulties, and as a parent myself I've experienced both, so I can totally relate. So what I thought would be really nice to do first was just introduce everybody and say what your role is, so we know what it is you do, and then we can just go through some questions that we've had come in from our families, and it sort of covers a range of topics over the eating and feeding. So I'll go first of all. So I am Leanne Henderson and I am a participation manager for Family Voice Surrey, and I'm also a parent to two autistic daughters. So I'll go this way around. So Jenny.
Hello everyone, so I'm Jenny Heyler. I'm speech and language therapist with a specialism in dysphagia and feeding, and I'm from Children and Family Health Surrey, so it's great to be here today. Thank you.
And Sarah.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Jordan. I'm a service manager for Specialist Community Children's Nursing. I'm also working for Child and Family Health Surrey.
And Jo?
Hi, I'm Jo Neville. I'm one of the working for Children and Family Health Surrey, and I work in the southwest quadrant, so that's Guildford and Waverley. And as health visitors, we work within the 0 to 19 team. So that is health visitors, nursery nurses, staff nurses, and school nurses.
Thank you. And Sally.
Hello, I'm Sally Rogers. I'm a speech and language therapist. I'm the professional lead for speech and language therapy in Children and Family Health Surrey. I'm also lead a team called CHES, which stands for Community Health Early Support. Now, I have to confess, I'm not actually an expert on this topic, but I know everyone on the call. So that's how I'm helping today, I think.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, so I think it would probably be a good idea to start with eating and feeding. So one of the things that we hear quite a lot from our families is what support and services are there to support families who might be encountering problems with their child with eating and feeding?
So if I start, shall I?
Yeah.
From sort of the 0 to 5s particularly, where probably we get as health visitors a lot of questions, a lot of people coming to clinics and phoning the advice line. I would say that's probably the crux of all, the main thing that we get. So for parents at home who are worried about any sort of sleeping issues or infant feeding issues or anything like that, and they want, if they want to have a chat, they're very welcome to call the 0 to 19 advice line. It's open Monday to Fridays, 8 till 5. And the calls are answered by a really experienced health team. So health visitors, nursery nurses, lots of expertise. And for those children that are over 5 years, we can then, what we normally do is email the school nurses, and then they will get back to those parents and discuss any problems. I mean, normally it's just a little bit of reassurance most of the time. I think as parents, you sort of think, gosh, am I doing the right thing? I just don't know. Or I've heard that, other parents are doing this, but my child's not doing that. And sometimes just talking it through really helps. And most of the time you do know yourself that, things are either okay, or perhaps you're a bit suspicious that something's a little bit wrong. But I think that's probably the first port of call for phoning the advice line. And then if those health practitioners can't, sort of solve the problem or reassure, then they can signpost. And we've got the Children and Family Health website, which has got loads and loads of information on it. Advice for parents, parent pages, videos, lots of videos, and particularly infant feeding as well. We've got a specific infant feeding page, which again signposts you to Facebook page as well, which is brilliant. And if all that fails, then we've got the clinics that we can then book you into a clinic and you can have face-to-face time with a health professional. So that's a starter, I guess.
Brilliant. And Jenny, did you want to?
Yeah, I suppose the only thing to add really is that what a valuable resource the health visitors are, and they do offer universal services such as Joanne, you'll put me right, but I think at the 4 months there's universal offer to attend the Introduction to Family Foods course, which parents are encouraged to go on. And then there are also developmental checkpoints as well. So there's like the 10 to 12 month check, there's the 2-year check, which are really valuable times to be talking and finding out about whether this is okay, if there's advice, or whether actually we do need to be reaching out to more specialist services. There's other services like nurseries and your childminder. If you're in reaching out to those level of support is really important as well. And then, you know, if you are feeling you've got concerns that this has been going on for quite a while, maybe that's the time to start talking, picking up the phone to your health visitor, actually asking for a one-to-one, or your GP is also a very good source of information. Just to see, you know, how is the weight doing? Are there other referrals needed, like the dietitian maybe, or even specialist services like myself, language therapy? And that's where we would manage concerns where there are concerns where maybe the swallow is not safe and there are concerns around aspiration. So that's where the speech and language therapy role would come in. And then occupational, their specialist input is around more that sensory development, when maybe there's a range of sensory difficulties affecting maybe food, but also a range of other developmental areas as well. So I hope that gives everyone like an overview.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's really good to sort of have that reassurance of, you know, of where you can go, and just to have it, sometimes just to have that conversation. Is this okay? Is it, you know, is this normal, or, you know, whatever it is. We often hear from new parents that they're sort of starting the weaning process, and they just say, you know, my baby just cannot tolerate any lumps or any sort of different textures or things like that. What can they do in those situations? Because I think, and sometimes they really struggle with the sort of weaning off milk and things like that, and you know, they I think they panic, because obviously if the baby's sort of, you know, gagging when if there's anything lumps, then they then panic and think, you know, oh god, they can't, you know, tolerate them. So I think there's lots of these kind of things that go through parents' minds. So is there anything that they can do, or is there anything that would sort of start to show a bit more alarm bells, I suppose, with, you know, if that went on for a certain length of time? Or
I think before the alarm bells show, I think certainly from a health visitor's perspective, I think we would always want to talk about whether your child is developmentally ready. So are you actually beginning to introduce solid foods at the right time, which is 6 months? How are you doing it? So, you know, are they sitting comfortably in a high chair, preferably? Not many distractions around, you know, focused on eating, but also to remember that actually it's a work in progress. It doesn't just happen overnight. I think from my perspective, and I think as a parent, you want your child to progress really quickly to everything, don't you? You know, you want them walking and talking and everything before they really are probably ready to do so. But it's the same with food. So it's actually meant to be, you know, that the first few months is meant to be a fun process. It's trying varieties of textures and tastes and lots of different things. And I think sometimes parents feel it's quite a complicated process when actually it isn't, because then you do exactly as you said, Leanne, people then start thinking, my gosh, what about milk? How many meals should they be having? How, if they're eating that much? And, you know, it all gets a little bit overwhelming sometimes. But I think from my perspective, keep it fun. Keep it really simple, keep consistency. Once you start a sort of a routine and have sort of a lunch time or whatever, try and keep it around about the same time. So you're your baby and child is sort of expecting, you know, that to sort of come. I know it's not always possible if you're out and about, times change sometimes, but and I think the main thing is just don't panic, and try not to show your anxiety if you're it. And I think that's a huge thing, and particularly if children appear to be gagging or choking, it is a normal process to start with. They have to learn how much to bite, how much to chew, the volume in their mouth. You know, it's a different way of eating. You know, they've been breastfeeding or taking from a bottle, so it's a very different way of eating. So, and I think then if we do find, you know, as health visitors or the 0 to 19 team, that this is then not improving after a few months with hopefully from us, then we would refer then on to someone like Jenny. So perhaps over to you, Jenny, with the ones that maybe are a bit more tricky that I wouldn't know about.
So gagging is a very normal developmental feature when babies first start to wean. And I think as parents, it can be really alarming and really disconcerting. But actually, it's a defensive mechanism because from a sensory perspective, they're just feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So the gag is a good response. And if your baby is gagging, then inside you might be feeling like, oh no, but try and give them a big smile and reassure them. If you're feeling like the gag is becoming into a choke, then of course you need to slap them on the back, and you may need to just reassure them that they're going to be absolutely fine, but lots of reassurance and lots of positivity. And babies who maybe are a bit more prone to gagging, I would really be encouraging lots of touch and lots of exploration and lots of like hands-on messiness basically during meal times. And that goes for all children, to be honest, with are finding feeding a little bit challenging. So the more children touch and explore and really look at what they're happy, what they're doing, the happier they are with like purees and just food on their hands, then the more likely they're going to take it up to their mouth, and the more likely they will start to explore and they would just start to desensitize. So we really would encourage, like, mess is good. And let your baby just explore for 20, 30 minutes in just a really relaxed way. You're keeping a watchful eye on them, a nice rhythm. Just follow baby's cues as well. You know, if baby is like turning its head away and saying, I don't want any more, then that also just really respect that, and just try and keep the spoon at a measured pace. So only offer them the spoon when maybe they have cleared their mouth and it's completely still and they're ready to go again. So just follow your baby's rhythm and their cues, and all of those elements will keep it a really positive and more pleasurable meal times. And just keep meal times to maybe that 20-30 minutes, no longer than 30 minutes would be absolutely ideal. So lots of smiles, lots of, sometimes you have to be a bit of an actor, and it will be, you know, bit by bit, just like Joanne says, it takes a natural pace and it does take time to get established. So the perseverance is a really big key in this, really.
And try to eat together as well.
Yeah.
So you role model them as well. So I think some parents think, you know, that they're not using knives and forks yet, you know, older children, and actually they may not have actually sat down with many people eating, so they don't know how, you know, they haven't watched particularly. So it's those real basic things that I think we forget as adults.
No, that's so interesting, and I think it's that kind of just relaxing and just, you know, enjoying the sort of process and everything, isn't it, rather than getting that, you know, worrying about, you know, what another child's doing and they should be doing it by this age. It's you know, just having that, you know, enjoying it is just, you know, really, really important. We do get, I mean, obviously this is kind of a sort of a related thing, but parents come to us and they just say, my child just will not eat, you know, literally will not eat, and they try all different foods, and, you know, they're just absolutely adamant that they are not going to eat. And, you know, a lot of them possibly a little bit older, and they perhaps started off eating a little bit better and then progressively sort of stop a little bit. And we do hear quite a lot that they sort of say, oh, my child's so fussy, and, you know, it's that kind of, they'll only eat certain things, and, you know, what do I do? What kind of things should parents be doing in those instances? Because I think there's sometimes they find, you know, looking on the internet and all kinds of things, different conflicting advice, and some say, you know, keep going, or just go with it, you know, and I think it can be quite confusing sometimes when they're in that situation as to what to do.
I think from my point of view, I think as a health visitor, you know, I'd be looking at, are they filling themselves up with lots of fluid or something like that? Are they drinking lots of extra water or juice, or are they filling themselves up with milk? And sometimes we find that when children, if they have a bit of an illness and a virus, they'll turn back to, you know, the milks and the comfort, whatever comforts them. Sometimes it takes quite a little while to get out of that habit again, and quite a few months sometimes.
Okay.
I think also think about what food you're offering your children. I think sometimes, again, if there is a lot of processed food used and a lot of jars to start with, they get used to that certain taste. And so ideally, if you can, just keep it to your normal family foods, and without too much salt and too many spices, so that they get used to that sort of really home cooked food. So I have had parents where they perhaps haven't been confident themselves with cooking, and that's a real issue. I think if you're not confident yourself with cooking, then you suddenly have to produce these meals for your child. It's quite difficult.
Yeah.
So and meal times come round so quickly, don't you find?
Exactly.
I do as a parent.
Yes.
It's constant.
Never ending. You're right. So
it is. Yeah, there is a definite demand to it. I think it's okay to offer your child their liked foods. If they do have a really restricted range, it is okay. And as parents, you mustn't feel guilty that you're giving them their liked foods. And ways of encouraging them to expand out the range of foods that they can potentially move on to would be, again, what we'd be suggesting is really playing with these foods. So if there's a new food and a new dinner that you would like them to move on to, maybe, I don't know, it's a spag bowl, it's a roast dinner, or it's a curry or something, but they're not familiar with it, then just try a play approach first. And the more and again, I'm going back to the more they touch it, the more they smell it, the more that they show interest in it, the more likely they would then move on to putting it into their mouths. So don't expect new foods to be accepted straight away. It actually takes, I think there's studies that suggest it takes at least 20 times, and that's for children. A very positive approach to feeding and meal times. So it shows that feeding and new foods need to be offered over and over again, so that children do become more familiar with them. And I would just encourage a play approach where there is, and away from meal times as well, so there is actually no pressure to actually eat, but to have a good experience with it, and then the child is in control and can do it on their terms, really. So that really encourage. And I'd also encourage other things like trying to, like when you're doing the shopping, letting them actually put the shopping away and helping you, because the more they see all the different products, the more likely they will become interested and familiar with things. And that's just or just gently desensitize them. And also we find that children maybe who aren't interested in food, are not getting all the experiences, they limit all their experience as well. So a really good way is, if you are making a sandwich, even like an 18-month-old can help you make a sandwich. You can do hand-over-hand support to do some buttering. You can add the cheese or whatever your filling is. And then, or you can, they can help offer food around the table. Other ways to support encouraging is maybe to have different platters on the table, some choices. So always put their liked foods on the table for them to choose. But also, if there's some new foods, just put them as a choice in the middle of the table, things like that. So those suggestions help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really, really helpful. I think it's it can be really, really tricky, I think, as a parent, just when your child will only eat one certain thing. I know for my own children, my youngest particularly, you know, she will literally, I mean, she's autistic, but she literally will eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and there is no changing what she has. And it's just, the way I've kind of come around to look at it is she's eating, she's drinking, and, you know, and it's, you know, I always offer new things, but it's that, I think sometimes for me, it's not having the worry about it. It's that, do you know what, it's okay.
Yeah.
They're alive, they're well, they're, you know, it's that, you know, I think it's when you get really worried and panicked and everything about it. And then of course that goes on to children as well, doesn't it? And it's, you know, which I've done many a time as parents. So no, it's really interesting to hear all the different sort of possibilities that you can do for that, which is great.
I think Jenny's right. It's your guilt, isn't it? And your anxiety. And I think for some parents, I know it's very difficult when it's a very, very limited menu, but it's amazing how a lot of children, if parents actually keep a bit of a food diary, they'd be quite surprised. It might be a huge amount, but you know what they are having out of that small amount is actually not bad. So
yeah, no, absolutely
encouraging.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And then in terms of so I guess this is more of a much more of a sensory thing. So, you know, we get parents sort of say, well, you know, my child won't feed themselves, and, you know, it goes as far as, well, they won't use spoon and fork, but also they won't touch the food. So I know obviously the sort of playtime and everything like that is great, but what do we do when they just literally just hate the sort of, they hate having messy hands and they don't like the feeling of it, and that just causes them, you know, they're sort of like, no, not going there. Is there anything that can be done to sort of help them? Because I guess that comes from a kind of, I don't know, a more of a worry place for the child, and they just don't like the feeling, and then they obviously, that carries on and they don't want to touch it again.
So this is more like OT, this is more like sensory processing. And some children, their sensory systems are just, well, it can be primed, or they can be receptive to just too much information, and so a texture can just be overwhelming for them. Their thresholds are very low, and so as soon as like that different texture, whether it's moving from, maybe they're okay with dry, but as soon as it becomes wet, that it's just it's not tolerated well, and they don't like getting things on their hands. And sometimes it's not just specific to food. Sometimes, you know, it's to do with lots of different materials, whether that's clothing, whether that's maybe grass or soil or sand, or just water and bath times. So I think it is, you know, I think just being aware and being in tune that these textures are challenging and are difficult for your child is a really good starting point, because as soon as you are in tune and you have this empathy that all this is challenging, I would encourage you not to avoid these situations, but in a very gentle way. So just little and often, just to start challenging them so that they are starting to touch maybe foods, and start with foods which they can tolerate and are in their comfort zone. So maybe more dry things, and work your way through in a methodical way, you know, all the different dry foods that they will touch. And then you can start to challenge them and just starting to touch maybe some wetter things like some yogurt, some purees, or you can with more lumps really. And it only needs to be for a short amount of time. But I would also encourage you to think about the developmental level, the play level that your child is at. So if your child loves sensory play, then incorporate the food into like a sensory play experience. So putting it on a table, putting it on the high chair tray, and just letting them touch, letting them try and transfer from one bowl to another bowl, letting them maybe shoot some, I don't know, rice pops down a kitchen roll holder, letting them put, if they're into more cause and effects, so they get a good experience when they do something which is nice and rewarding. Then something like they could do some posting, or they could drive a car through these different types of textures that you're trying to encourage them. And it just needs to be, it could be for 10 seconds, it could be for a minute. It can just expand out bit by bit, really. So does that answer?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Answer that question.
Yeah, no, and that's so lovely just to think of it as a, you know, I love the Rice Krispies down the can't speak now, kitchen roll holder. That's just such a simple thing, but just it could be fun, but it's still bringing that into it, isn't it? Which
yeah, definitely. Just with everyday toys around you, and interesting. And if you can find an activity that they like, but then add the food to it, so that might be, you know, if they love Peppa Pig, let's get Peppa Pig messy, you know, let's Peppa Pig, and then you could do some printing, and you can just like expand it on. So, and gently it will help to desensitize them, but it only needs to be for short periods of time, but listen often is a really positive way forwards.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much.
And to say something.
Yes, of course. Sorry, Sally. Yes.
I wonder if we could include Sarah in the discussion. Because
yes, absolutely.
To join our call, because we've got Jo, that's sort of, you know, health visitor, very universal. You know, every family sees a health visitor, and of course, only some families are going to be seeing someone like Jenny, where they've got, you know, concerns around their child's the swallowing. But Sarah's team are a specialist nursing team who work in the community, and of course, quite often what we want to work as a team for all kinds of families of children with all kinds of needs. So I wanted to bring Sarah into the discussion as well, in terms of
absolutely.
How do you get away, Sarah, in the families that you work with, because I think sometimes, you know, they can need a high level of support from nurses. I wondered if you could sort of come into the discussion in terms of
and actually my next couple of questions might be very well tailored towards Sarah. No, don't be silly. No, not at all. No, absolutely. I think a lot of the questions are kind of they were quite, I suppose, not generic, but kind of as in like they could potentially be for children who have additional needs, or perhaps they don't have additional needs or medical needs and that kind of thing. But my next two questions are, well, the last one particularly is, we've got quite a lot of families who whose children have got quite complex health needs, and, you know, various different things. And we have got quite a few families that have children who at one point or, you know, all the time have a nasal gastric tube. And I know families really, obviously, that's a really stressful situation to find yourself in. So it'd be really great to hear from Sarah and you all about, you know, how can parents go about supporting their child in the best possible way. I know Benedict, who's not here today, but she always talks about her son and how she always wanted, he had a nasal gastric tube, and she always wanted to include him in like family meal times and things like that. And I can imagine it must be really challenging when you're in those kind of circumstances to sort of live as a family but still have those quite complex and specialist needs. So any advice that you can give to families in those kind of situations would be really, really beneficial.
I think from our nursing point of view, we would be encouraging families to have their children at the table at meal times, whether they're tube feeding or even unable to participate in any sort of feeding. We would still want the children to be at the table. We would also be encouraging, if we had any child that was being fed by a method other than by their mouth, that we would be working with the dietitians and speech therapists to make sure that those children were encouraged to have tastes if that was possible, or suck on a dummy, or chew on a toy, anything really, so that they didn't lose that ability to want to use their mouth. Because our hope would always be, if possible, to stop tube feeding. That would be the aim.
And
if
these
that was
children,
possible.
They just need a really high level of like multidisciplinary, like coordinated care. So that's why it's great to be able to work with like the children's nursing team, as well as the dietitians and health visitors, so that we're and you know, parents are key in understanding what they want for their children, so that we can help ensure that the plan is safe for the child, but also it's positive for the family and it's as inclusive as possible as well. So but yes, always try and promote oral feeding so it's optimized as much as is safe and possible, and looking at alternative ways of trying to compensate for that where appropriate, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we have families who potentially sometimes have it for a short term because, you know, their child's weight has dropped to such a low level that, you know, everything has been tried and, you know, it just hasn't worked. And I think obviously that would be a last resort, but then families then worry, is it going to happen again, you know, when that stops? And, you know, I don't know, Sarah, if there's anything that you can suggest that they can sort of do to sort of, you know, if they're in that circumstance, that when they have the tube removed, is there anything that can help to sort of prevent it again?
I don't think there's anything to prevent it. Because it very much depends on the health issues that the child has.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that if it does happen again, the aim is always to reduce the dependence on that tube if possible, and not use it if possible. And the other message I'd like to get across really is that even if they do have a feeding tube, they can still be included. It doesn't make them any different. And we work with schools all the time when children go into schools to have them at the table in the dining hall. We have our challenges all the time with schools perhaps wanting to remove children and give their feeds in a different room, and we're saying no, you don't need to do that. You know, children can sit with their peers, they can have their feed, as long as they're sitting in sort of a safe place where no one can fall over tubes and feeding lines and various things. But the important thing is they see the other children enjoying the food, because that just helps.
Absolutely. And I think that is just so important, isn't it? Because I think, you know, any child in that situation, they don't want to feel different, and they want to, you know, they want to be with their friends, and, you know, so to have to be taken somewhere separate because of the, you know, that, it's just, yeah, so that's really heartening to hear that is, you know, it's totally encouraged within that, which is just, it's just so important, isn't it? Right, I think we'd better go on to sleep. We're slightly running out of time. I could go on for hours about this. I find it so interesting. But so in terms of, we hear a lot about sleep, as I'm sure you all do as well. And some of the questions we have are around, so it's probably slightly older child, but just their child just won't sleep, they won't settle, particularly quite often without mum being there. Sometimes the mum stays with them, they fall asleep, mum gets up to leave, and that's it, they're wide awake again. Is there anything that you know, parents can do to help with this, to sort of alleviate the, you know, the constant exhaustion of it, I guess?
Oh gosh, well, shall I make a start? It's must say, sleep is, I think, the most difficult thing, because there's so many elements to sleep that you have to think about, and it's really, I must say, it's a really individualized thing. Everybody is really, really different. So I would say to parents, you know, give us a call and we'll have a chat about it, or meet and really talk about what's going on for you and your child, and then make a plan. Because I mean, there's so many factors. There's, you know, the parent's perception of what is a sleep problem. So a problem for the parents may not be a problem for the child. That's a huge thing. What's the environment, the sleep environment like? The age of the child, as always with everything, you know, and their stage in development. So particularly for the younger children up to a year, you know, they will have their own sort of biological circadian rhythms, which never match with us as adults, unfortunately. And so it's really difficult when parents come, you know, with young children particularly, and they say they want, you know, their child to sleep through the night and have a sleep. It's often not going to happen, and a lot of children will not sleep through the night for up to a year for sure. And what is through the night? You know, some people will think it's 10 hours, some people think it's 6 hours, some people think it's 5. So again, it's about talking through those sorts of things, and then looking at what's happening during the day with nap times, and what are they doing in the day. So that always often has a relevance on their nighttime sleeping, so it's really getting parents to think about the environment. Are children cold? Are they being woken by neighbours? Is there too much light in the room? And this would be for older children as well. So it's really looking at that environment. Gosh, yes, I mean, I would say it's difficult to answer as a blanket. I think it's a very individual thing, and we would have to then talk to that parent and make a plan from there.
So if a parent was really struggling with sleep, would the health visitor team be the sort of first port of call? Yeah.
We can certainly, absolutely, we can try, yes, absolutely, and also it would help because it would rule out anything, you know, anything else. Are there any other developmental issues, any physical issues, anything going on for that child that we're perhaps missing or the parents aren't aware of? So that's really important as well.
Can I see a page on our website, Jo, that's recently put on there to do with sleep and when your child is unwell? Is that something that we've updated recently?
It's definitely on there. It's definitely on there, and I know that they do have on a couple of those pages the sort of the green, amber, red, which is a really nice system to look at. But yeah, certainly there's the childhood illnesses part, and for those parents that are thinking, are they unwell and I'm not really sure, you can go to that and have a very quick look. It's absolutely, you know, we all know when you have a cold yourself, you know, your nighttime sleeping goes hot because you can't breathe, you're laying down, you're bunged up. The same happens for children, and for very young children, they can't tell you often, so that has an impact on their sleep. And also, again, if they're young children, they're feeding during the day and during the night, so it all goes a little bit topsy-turvy.
Of course, no, it's always one of those things that we hear at Family Voice all the time. It's just because I think as a parent it's just exhausting, isn't it? And I think a lot of parents, they sort of get to the 6-month mark with their baby and they're still not sleeping very well, and they're like, oh, when is this going to end? And then a lot of our families have children with various neurodiverse difficulties, and you know, so particularly with autism, we know that sleep can be really challenging, and I think it's just so exhausting, and you just, you know, you sort of get up in the morning and you just feel like like a kind of zombie really, and it's you know, so I think it's something that we do hear all the time, and it's, I know it's a real,
and I know it is frustrating for parents and for us as professionals, actually. You know, we want to be able to help and make things better. But sleep is the one issue where sometimes there aren't any answers.
Absolutely.
Don't happen improvements don't happen very quickly, and then sometimes you do get an improvement and then it all just regresses again. That's part of, you know, the developmental process. So that's really frustrating. You know, we often have parents saying, my child did sleep very well for 3 or 4 months and now they're really awful again. And I suppose the one thing to remember is that certainly children up to a year, I think, you know, it's very unusual if they do sleep through the night, you know, and do it consistently. They may do it for a few nights and then not for a few, and then again for a few. So I think if parents are prepared that that's going to happen, then the expectation is realistic. I think in your own head, it's a bit more manageable sometimes, I think. And we all hear the parents, and we always remember the parents that say, my child's sleeping through the night. You never remember those children, you never remember those parents saying, my child is not sleeping through the night, because often they probably won't say it to you.
Yeah, no,
there's
absolutely.
that perception that children will sleep through the night, but they often don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm just thinking about sort of slightly old, well, not even, it doesn't need to be old children, but those with neurodiverse, so things like autism, ADHD, and, you know, similar conditions. Is there anything that parents can do to kind of try and make sleep a little bit less of a challenge? I know we've got some parents whose children take medication to sort of support them. But I wondered, I'm just thinking of all the sort of families that are in this kind of situation, and they're sort of like, they've got past 5, 6, 7, their child's still not sleeping. And I just wondered if there was anything that they could possibly try to help, really.
If they're in a specialist school, Leanne, the specialist school nurses actually do offer sleep programs. And they do they will do sessions for parents. It's quite a new, innovative thing that they've established. They've established it sort of during COVID, really. So a couple of them have gone off and undertaken Sleep Scotland courses to learn about sleep and how to support the parents. And they've also received funding to develop sort of resources that they will retain within each school. So books, videos.
Oh, wow.
There's some sort of sleep box. Don't ask me how it all works, but certainly if the children are within the specialist school system, they can approach their school nurses and ask. Personally, I think it's something that probably could be spread wider, because it's not just children with complex needs, as we've just heard. There are children in mainstream schools that have equally, equally awful sleep problems. So yes, it could be spread wider, but as I say, it's new within specialist school nursing. It's just finding its feet at the moment, but it is something that potentially we could think of.
That's brilliant. I had no idea, and that's such a welcome news, actually, because I think for a lot of, and as you say, it's so new, so it could potentially, sort of go much wider. And I think for families in those situations, I just think that'll just be a real fantastic opportunity just to get some support, just to, because it's exhausting. It is, my eldest is 9 and sleep is a real problem. So from a parent point of view, it's just exhausting. I'm just tired thinking of it. So, and then another thing that we get quite a lot is that children get up so early. And they're sort of like, they're ready to rock and roll at 4 o'clock in the morning, and how can I make them sleep till a more reasonable hour? And I just wondered, is there anything that can be done to sort of support them with that?
It's a difficult one, early waking. Yes, I mean, I think again, it's probably just part of their sleep pattern, and perhaps it's just I mean, certainly in the past, we've looked at perhaps bringing bedtime forward a little bit, but just very gradually in sort of by sort of 15, 30 minutes over a period of a few weeks, and seeing whether that makes a difference. Again, for those children that are having naps during the day, when are they having those naps? So are they having them quite late in the day, so therefore they're not going to go when they perhaps their sort of biological clock wants them to, and it's all a little bit sort of all haywire all over the place. Again, looking at the environment, is it that the neighbour's getting up at 5:30 and waking them up? It could be something as simple as that for an older child particularly. But also for those very young babies, again, the under one. I mean, for the first 6 months, they should really be sleeping in the same room as their parents anyway, to reduce cot death. But again, it's they perhaps just sometimes just want that closeness with their parents. And so it's about perhaps that feeling that they do wake, and where am I'm sort of on my own, I just want a bit of a cuddle, and they do still want that at a young age. So again, it would be talking it through and seeing what's actually happening during the day and during the night, and then putting something together and strategies to manage. So, but early waking is really difficult.
It is. I think it is, and I think some children are just more susceptible to waking up early than others, aren't they? Because you get some that just when they're asleep, they're asleep, and then others are just like ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And those very early wakers, it can still be part of their night time, but that's something. Yes. Whatever it is that has woken them, they're then sort of wide awake, and but actually they still need their couple of hours. Parents' perception is that they're wide awake and that's it, they're ready to start the day. So sometimes we sort of say for those early wakers, have a bit of a buffer between what you do and so when they wake, don't then do something exciting with them. Don't put the iPad on or take them down and watch the telly, because they might think that's my kind of reward, that's quite exciting. So it's actually having something, to just keep them calm, and in the bedroom, and seeing if that can then sort of, lull them back into some sleep.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting actually, because I think sometimes when they appear really like lively, the thing is like, oh, okay, we'll get up then, and and then they really are ready to go.
Yeah,
so it's really interesting. And then some children, some families we hear from, they have their sometimes their child wakes up really, having really awful nightmares and shaking and just being incredibly distressed. And sometimes this can happen over sort of a period of time, or sometimes it can be just, every so often. And is there anything that parents can do to sort of, well, I suppose, to support their child when it's happening, and and then afterwards, is there anything that can be done to sort of help prevent them?
I think with sort of nightmares and night terrors, again, it's very normal for children to have them between the ages of 3 and 6 is usually the time that they do have them. They normally grow out of it. Okay. It's normally just a phase. I know that's not very helpful to hear, as to some parents, it's just a phase. How long is the phase going to be? It's actually very normal for children to do that. For the older children, it might be worth talking to them about, is there something that's troubling them? Is there something particularly, can they remember that, what it is that's waking them? And then just giving them lots and lots of reassurance. Again, it's going back to sort of having that sort of consistent bedtime relaxing routine when they go to bed, so it's all quite nice and nice and calm, and then if and when they do wake at night, it's going in and again being very calm, not showing your anxiety and your worry, because it can look quite distressing at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just sort of maintaining that calmness and that reassurance and settling them back again. So, and they should grow out of it. So I don't know about sort of older children. I don't know, Sarah, whether you have any sort of older children with nightmares that perhaps have problems.
I think the ones that we come across most often in our services are perhaps those that have had lots of medical interventions in the past, maybe. So But I don't know that we'd advise that much on sleep. I mean, I think we'd look at what was happening at night and whether cares finish at an appropriate time and medications are given at an appropriate time. So you're not sort of interrupting that night's sleep. But as for managing nightmares, it would just be a matter of reassurance, I think, when it happens. So yeah, I don't know that we would be overly involved.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, I think we've covered a lot again as our session earlier. So thank you so much for coming along and answering questions and, you know, and telling us more about all the wonderful things that you do. I know this will be invaluable for our families. So we really do appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to doing one again with you soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.